friends, today we are moving on to the last part of the chapter, biodiversity and conservation, and the last part is conservation of biodiversity. Okay, so we saw the causes of biodiversity loss, we saw the patterns of biodiversity, we saw the consequences of biodiversity loss, isn't it? Now we are moving on to the last part, which is a very important part. What it is conservation of biodiversity. Okay, so how can I conserve biodiversity? Right, so there are two types of conservation. There are two types of conservation. So what are the two types of conservation? One is the in situ conservation and the other one is ex situ conservation. Okay, what is the difference between these two? What is in situ and what is ex situ? Now when you are saying what is in situ, in the natural habitat. So the animals, plants, everything, the organisms are preserved, are kept, okay, are being monitored, are being conserved where? In its natural habitat itself, the plants and animals are being conserved. Okay, so that one we call it as what? In situ conservation. Ex situ means what? It is not in its natural habitat. I am taking them from their places and moving them to some other places in the artificial environment. There I am going to conserve those animals. Okay, so these are the two types of conservation. One is in situ, in its natural habitat. One is ex situ. What is ex situ? Outside. Okay, so outside I am going to conserve it. Now when you are saying this biodiversity conservation strategies, how can I make differences? Okay, so in situ and another one is what? Ex situ. In situ, what are the examples where you can find the plants and animals, organisms are protected in the natural habitat? It is biosphere reserve, national parks, wildlife sanctuaries, sacred groves. All these biosphere reserve, national parks, wildlife sanctuaries, sacred groves, these are all its natural habitat. I am not going to take the animals. I am not going to move the plant from one place to another. I am not going to take the seedling and cultivate it somewhere in the artificial environment. In its own environment, I am going to protect it. Okay, so that is what? In situ conservation. So there are in India 14 biosphere reserve, 90 national parks, 448 wildlife sanctuaries, and some sacred groves. Clear? Now ex situ means what? In the artificial environment. I am making it, thereafter I am bringing them there and I am going to preserve them, okay, or I am going to conserve them. Now what are they? Botanical gardens. Okay, Indian botanical garden, you would have heard this in last year we have learned. So botanical gardens where all the plant species are kept, the plant species which needs differing temperature and all, they are kept in greenhouses, isn't it? So that is regarding botanical garden. Animals are preserved where? In zoological parks. Okay, so in zoological parks also you can find the conservation is taking place. So the animals are not living in its own environment. We are bringing the animals from some other places and going to preserve them there, as well as it can be used for what? The viewers to view the animals and learn about the same. Okay, for the study purpose and all we can use the same. Botanical garden and zoological parks. From different parts, the animals, especially the endangered animals, are brought and is being preserved, so that they are being conserved in the artificial environment, providing all the facilities to them. Okay, and next is what? Seed banks and gene banks. Okay, what is seed banks and gene banks? Some species are endangered, so what they are doing is that they are collecting the seeds of the species and they are preserving it. Okay, so preserving it in places called as what? Seed banks. Gene banks means what? Some species are going to get endangered and they are having some very good characteristics. I should not let that species to get extinct. In order to do the same, the animals, the plants, everything which has having very good characteristics, the male gametes as well as the female gametes, sperms, okay, or any part of the stem if it is being cultivated by cuttings and all. So all these things are collected and it is preserved in one place. Okay, so these sperms and all, when you are seeing what it is, actually it is a collection of genes, isn't it? So they are having some good characteristics. The genes is coding for good characteristics. So endangered animals means we are going to collect what? The sperms, eggs, and we are going to keep it in the freezing temperature. We are going to preserve it in the freezing temperature, and those places, what do we call? We call it as gene bank. Okay, so that is gene bank. Now moving on to international efforts for biodiversity conservation. We will discuss this in detail in the coming a little bit later. Okay. So this is international efforts for biodiversity conservation. So in the international scale, what and all measures has been taken for conserving biodiversity. The first one is that the Earth Summit. Okay. So Earth Summit was sat on what? It is in 1992 in a place called Rio de Janeiro, where it is in Brazil. Okay, it's a municipality in Brazil. There, a convention, all different countries joined, and they are like just like signing a treaty. They used to tell that we will do this, we will do that for conserving the nature. Okay, so like that they sat, and what was the main intention of the summit is that we cannot say that I am not going to use any animals or any plants for my purpose. Obviously, I will have to use it for whatever the reasons. Many reasons have been listed out, isn't it? So, in case if I am using it, I have to sustainably utilize it. What do you mean by sustainable utilization? I should not overexploit. Okay, I should see to it that when I am taking it, I am repaying the same. So, when I am cutting one tree, instead of that, I have to plant how many? 10 trees. Okay, so like that, sustainably in a correct rate, so that an animal is not going to get endangered or going to get extinct. In checking their how much it is there, based on that we have to think and use it. We should not over exploit it. So that can be called as what? Sustainable utilization. It has to be sustained for the next future generation, isn't it? So we have to utilize it in a sustainable manner. Okay, so that is what the Earth Summit was aiming at. Next, the World Summit, which year 2002 it's at on Johannesburg, where it is South Africa. Okay, so there they said, and in this how many countries participated? 190 countries participated, and they pledged. Okay, they said that yes, we will be reducing what? The loss of biodiversity. Okay, whether it is in the global scale or it is local or regional level, whichever species, whatever the plants and animals are, we are not going to harm them much. Okay, we will be reducing the loss of biodiversity, taking measures. How can they take measures? You would have heard the Project Tiger and all, right? So what is the Project Tiger? Which means that if someone is harming the tiger or if someone is harming any animals, then necessary actions will be taken against the person. Even he can be put into prison for many years. Penalties are also very, very high. So like this, they use endangered species given a name called as what? The Project Tiger, like that. So what is happening is that if anybody is harming those animals, then they will be getting some sort of punishment, okay, which is much, what is that, they have to face a lot. Yeah, so this is regarding what? The World Summit. So these summits, why they are sitting? In order to conserve biodiversity, the countries are taking pledge, the countries are signing treaty stating that they will take care of their resources, okay, and sustainably utilize it, not going for over exploitation. Okay, so with this the chapter comes to an end. We will be discussing now in detail biodiversity conservation strategies. Okay.
Okay, so starting with conservation of biodiversity, how can we conserve biodiversity? By protecting its whole system, we can conserve what? Biodiversity. So the whole ecosystem has to be protected. In that way, we can conserve what? The biodiversity. If the habitat is protected, then the organism will be safe. Okay, so this biodiversity conservation can be of two types. One is, as already discussed, in situ, and another one is ex situ. What do you mean by in situ? Inside its environment, in their own place. If I am conserving, then I call it as what? In situ. And what is ex situ? If I am conserving it outside, okay, bringing them in a different artificial environment and conserving them, then we call it as what? We call it as ex situ conservation. Okay, so under in situ, what and all you are having? Biodiversity hotspots. Okay, then you are having protected areas. So these protected areas can be of four categories. What are they? One is biosphere reserve, second one is national parks, third one is wildlife sanctuaries, and the fourth one is sacred groves. Under ex situ conservation, protection of threatened. Threatened means what? The one which is endangered, the one which is very less in number, can become extinct soon. So that one we call it as what? A threatened species. Okay. So it can be conserved in zoological parks, or it can be conserved, in case of plants it is conserved in botanical gardens, and there are places called as what? Wildlife safari parks. So there also the wildlife are getting conserved. Okay. So that are the various places which threatened species can be conserved in the external environment, not in their own area, bringing it in the artificial environment. Now another way of ex situ conservation is protection of gametes. Gametes means the plant parts or the sperms or the male gamete, the pollen grain, female gamete, all these things are collected and it is being kept. Now for collecting and keeping this one, what is the issue is that these has to be maintained at very low temperature. So there is a process involved for them, that is we call it as cryopreservation, maintaining at very low temperature, so that the things are preserved for a longer duration of time. So in between you can find what they are doing is that they are going to do what, in the laboratory setup, in vitro, in the laboratory. So this tissue culture in the laboratory, seed banks in the laboratory, means in the closed environment only it is kept safe. Okay. Gene banks, all these organisms which are having some good characteristics, their cells are collected and it is being kept stored. Okay. So this process we call it as what? Cryopreservation. Whenever needed they will go for what? Mating. Okay. How to artificially they are going to make the sperm fuse with the egg. Okay. In the laboratory setup they are going to fuse and produce the organism, so that the organism is not becoming extinct. Okay. So like that what they are doing, they are preserving the things. Okay. So what are preserved? The biological material. So what are the materials? It can be genes or the cells, it can be gametes, it can be a part of a stem, a part of a root is preserved, so that by tissue culture they can regenerate afterwards. Whenever they are finding that population is going on decreasing of that, they will be undergoing fertilization in the lab setup, and after producing the offspring it has been released out. Okay. So this is regarding what? Your first part, biodiversity conservation. Now one by one we will be seeing. The first thing what we are going to see is that we are going to see is, 1 minute, yeah, biodiversity hotspots. So first topic is biodiversity hotspots. As the name suggests, hot spots. Now in corona, hotspots, you know what is hotspot? A region where there are more number of cases. We call it as what? The hotspots, isn't it? So here biodiversity hotspots means the region where there are many endangered organisms present, many threatened species, many vulnerable species are present. Means the species which are very less in amount, they can become extinct soon, are present, which is having a rich biodiversity. So that one we call it as what? The biodiversity hotspot. So innumerable number of species are present. Along with that, they also possessed some of the endangered species. Okay. So these regions, these are regions of high level of species. So many species are present. Okay. And high degree of endemism. Endemism means what? That species will be available only in that particular area. Then I call it as what? Endemic. Okay. So endemic species means the locally available species. You cannot find that species anywhere else in the world. So those areas are called as what? Biodiversity hotspots, having innumerable number of species, endangered species, as well as the species which are endemic in nature, available in only that place. Okay. So endemic species are found only in a limited region. You know, the region is not that vast, only to a limited region it will be present. And it has been identified there are 34 hotspots in the world. How many are there? 34. In India there are 3 hotspots. So what are the 3 hotspots? One is the Western Ghats, next is Sri Lanka, and thereafter Indo-Burma and Himalaya. Okay, so in these places, Western Ghats and Sri Lanka, Indo-Burma region and Himalaya. So these are the 3 regions which is confined as hotspot because of the presence of different types of species of animals and plants. Okay, they reduce mass extinction by 30%. We have to conserve these hotspots. These hotspots, humans are not allowed to enter and come out just like that, and they are preserving them in their natural habitat. How much percentage they are? 30% reduction in the loss is being controlled by whom? These biodiversity hotspot, the regions which are given as what? Hotspots. Okay, then protected areas. So moving on to the second part, what protected areas. There are 14 biosphere reserve, 90 national parks, 448 wildlife sanctuaries. We discussed. Okay, Jim Corbett National Park was first to be established in India, just to note the same. Okay, now moving on to another one called as Ramsar sites, very important, a new addition to the syllabus. Okay, so Ramsar sites. So what is Ramsar site? Ramsar sites are the region. Ramsar sites are the region which is good in wetlands, means which we consider it as wetlands. So what do you mean by wetlands? You know, marshy area where you can find much amount of clay soil with the water, somewhat marshy type of area. We call it as what? The Ramsar sites. In these Ramsar sites also you can find many species which are endemic, which are special to that regions are present. So we have to conserve this wetlands. Okay, so because of species richness, we need to conserve this wetlands. So conservation of wetlands has been the main aim of what? The Ramsar sites. So Ramsar site is confined to what? Conservation of wetlands. We are not going to speak about conservation of biodiversity as a whole. It's particularly conservation of wetlands. We call it as what? Ramsar sites. So Ramsar sites are wetlands which are considered to be of international importance. International importance as because they are good in much amount of species there are present, that's why they are very important. So those sites has been recognized. Okay, so these sites we call it as what? The Ramsar sites. Okay, and this Ramsar convention was as a treaty. International treaty means what? Many countries join together and they sign, I will not be disturbing these wetlands. From these wetlands we are not going to get any profit, we are not going to disturb them. Okay, so like that they are signing the treaty. Why? In order to conserve, and if you are using the same from that site, any herbs or any material which you are using from the Ramsar site, it should be used in a sustainable manner. What do you mean by sustainable? Sustainable means if you are taking one, you have to replace it by many. Okay, so we have to see to it that we are not over exploiting it and using it in a very minimum way so that it is not becoming extinct. Okay, so like that you can use the resources. Okay, so that is Ramsar convention. So there are how many Ramsar sites in India? 26 Ramsar sites are there. Some of them has been listed: Ashtamudi wetland, Sambar lake, then Rudrasagar lake, Chilika lake, Bitaghanika wetland. Okay, so these are all examples of what? The wetlands which you need to go through. Okay, so what is Ramsar sites? Ramsar sites are the regions which are referred to as the wetlands, and it's having some international importance because of species diversity. And what is Ramsar convention? It is a treaty signed by many countries in order to conserve what? The wetland. Sustainable use of the wetland is only allowed. Okay, and to list few Ramsar sites you have to go through. Okay, now moving on to the next one is sacred groves. Okay, so what is the sacred groves? Sacred groves, these are forest patches. Okay, forest patches means what? Sacred groves, like for example, you have a big tree like a banyan tree or a peepal tree, whatever, a very big tree. Okay, in that you can find many birds, many insects, many species are dwelling in that trees, means they are staying there. So there in one particular region you can find a group of trees, and they consider them as God. Okay, the trees are considered as God and it is being worshipped. So these places we call it as what? Sacred groves. They are sacred. They are very sacred place. So what they are doing is that these trees are being protected. So how the trees are being protected means this tree is a god. Just imagine the tree is a god. So do you think that anybody will go and cut that tree? No, isn't it? So they will be preserving that, like a lake or a tree. So that regions, what they feel is that all those things which are linked to that tree, or all those area which is nearer to that of this are being preserved. Why it is preserved? They believe that it is a place of worship and it has to be worshipped in a proper way and nobody should harm it. So no one will dare to go and disturb the tree. Indirectly what will happen? The thing will be protected, okay, the place will be protected. So these are forest patches set aside for worship. All the trees and wildlife within the area are protected by whom? The tribal people. The tribal people will not allow anyone to near that region, so that that region is protected. So many places you can find the people are not going to harm those places. Why? Because it is a place of worship, okay. So that place will remain protected. Along with that, the trees and the wildlife present over there will also remain protected. So these type of protection, we call it as what? Sacred groves. We call it as sacred groves, okay. So large number of rare and threatened plants can be found in these regions. I told you many plants which are endangered are found and is being preserved, okay. So some of the sacred groves examples are given: Khasi and Jaintia hills in Meghalaya, Western Ghat region of Karnataka and Maharashtra, Aravalli hills of Rajasthan, Sarguja, Chandra and Bastar areas of Madhya Pradesh are all examples for what? Sacred groves. In those areas, cutting of trees or affecting any animal is not allowed. By because they worship that as their god and they should not harm any organisms living there, okay. So this is another method of what? Protection. So Ramsar site and sacred groves is a new one which you are learning. Make sure most of the papers you get either Ramsar site or sacred groves, okay. Now the next is what? Ex situ conservation. I told you what is ex situ? Outside, okay, not in their habitat. They are being taken outside. From one place they are taken and it is shifted to another place. There they are creating an artificial setup and preserving it, okay. So this approach involves placing threatened animals and plants in special care units for their protection. India has 35 botanical gardens, 275 zoological parks where animals which have become extinct and wild are maintained. So in extinct and wild means what? You cannot find in the forest. Those animals are maintained where? In the zoological parks or the botanical gardens. So the animals are being preserved there, okay, they are being taken care of there, monitored there. So the extinct animal, some living species we can find where? In only in the ex situ conservation. In the in situ conservation you cannot find because that animals has become extinct in the wild, okay. And by using cryopreservation, I told you what is cryopreservation? Preservation at minus 196 degrees Celsius. So it's very temperature is very low, isn't it? So in that case they are preserving the thing, okay. So minus 196 degrees Celsius the things are getting preserved, okay. So what can be preserved? So in the laboratory setup, the sperms of the endangered animals, the eggs of the endangered animals, animal cells or tissues or plant parts, all are stored in the gene banks or seed banks we call, for a longer duration of time. In between they go for breeding, they go for fertilization in order to produce the plant or the animal, so that their thing is not becoming extinct, okay. Plants are propagated in vitro by tissue culture. We have already learned what is tissue culture, micropropagation, isn't it? It is a desirable approach when urgent measures to save extinctions are required. So it is a very good approach. Some animals are going to become extinct, the sperms and eggs are collected and they are being fertilized in vitro and the offsprings are produced, they are taken care in the artificial environment safely, so that animal is not becoming extinct, okay. So that is regarding your ex situ or off-site conservation. We call it as what? Off-site conservation is other name for what? Ex situ conservation, okay. Now this is the difference between in situ and ex situ. It is a conservation and protection of biodiversity in its natural habitat, in situ, in where? Outside their natural habitat, ex situ. Population is conserved in the surrounding where they have developed their distinctive features. So there in their own surrounding the population is conserved. Here the population is conserved in a simulated condition that closely resemble the natural habitat. So when the lion is kept in the zoo, it is not kept like that, being caged and all kept, it is not that good, isn't it? So like den like creature, tree in between you can find the water, pond is being set, so that to some extent it is resembling what? Their natural habitat, okay. So example for in situ is national park, biosphere reserve, wildlife sanctuaries. For ex situ it is botanical garden, zoological plus wildlife sanctuary, safari parks and gene banks are example for what ex situ conservation. With this we are coming to the end of the chapter. Hope so biodiversity and conservation chapter is clear to you people, and it's a very easy chapter. Keep reading, keep learning, stay home, stay safe. Thank you.